He thought he was escaping his past, until his dog uncovered a secret someone was willing to kill to keep buried. The storm hit just after midnight, turning the Louisiana swamp into a living nightmare of mud, water, and shadows. Caleb Ward didn't stop running. Not from the rain, not from the darkness, not even from the memories chasing him. The only one who stayed at his side was Titan, his war dog, his last reason to keep moving. When they stumbled upon a rotting cabin no one should have known about, Caleb thought he'd finally found shelter. But Titan knew better, because beneath that broken floor, something was waiting. Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. I'd love to see how far this story travels. The rain started before Caleb Ward even realized he was driving, and it tapped lightly against the windshield at first, like a warning he didn't want to hear. Then it grew heavier, faster, until the glass blurred into a sheet of gray. The road ahead twisted through the edge of town, disappearing into darkness and trees, but Caleb didn't slow down. He couldn't. Not after what happened. The flashing lights in his rearview mirror were long gone now, but he could still see them, burned into his mind like everything else. Red, blue, red, blue. The same colors that once lit up desert nights half a world away. His hands tightened around the steering wheel. "Keep it together," he muttered, though his voice didn't sound like his own. Beside him, Titan didn't move. The German shepherd sat upright in the passenger seat, steady and silent, his dark eyes fixed on Caleb. Not the road, not the storm, but him, watching, measuring, waiting. Caleb exhaled sharply and dragged a hand down his face. His beard was soaked with sweat despite the cold creeping through the truck's broken heater. His heart was still pounding too fast, like it hadn't gotten the message that the war was over. But it never was. Not really. A crack of thunder split the sky, and Caleb flinched hard enough to jerk the wheel. The truck swerved, tires slipping for a split second before gripping again. His breath hitched, chest tightening. For a moment, he wasn't on a muddy Mississippi road anymore. He was back there. Dust, heat, the smell of burning metal, the echo of gunfire snapping through the air. Someone shouting his name. No, screaming it. Then silence. The kind of silence that comes after everything changes. "Caleb?" He blinked. The storm rushed back in around him. The road, the trees, the rain hammering the hood of his truck. Titan's nose pressed lightly against his arm, grounding him. Caleb swallowed hard and nodded, though the dog hadn't made a sound. "Yeah," he said quietly. "I know. You're here, not there." But the line between the two felt thinner every day. He drove past the last streetlight without slowing. The town faded behind him, just a handful of dim lights swallowed by the storm. He didn't look back. There was nothing left there anyway, not after tonight. The bar, the shouting, the look on the man's face when Caleb grabbed him. Too hard, too fast. The sound of glass breaking, chairs scraping, someone pulling him off, someone else yelling to call the cops. He hadn't meant to lose control. He never did. But it always ended the same. And now it was over. The job at the mechanic shop? Gone. The landlord who barely tolerated him? Done. Whatever fragile thread he'd been holding onto, snapped. Caleb pressed the gas a little harder. The road narrowed as it curved away from town, turning into something less maintained, less traveled. Potholes filled with rainwater jolted the truck, but he didn't slow. He barely felt it. He wasn't heading anywhere specific, just away. The trees thickened on both sides, branches arching overhead like they were closing in. The air grew heavier, wetter. The scent of mud and decay seeped through the cracked window. Swamp country. Most people knew better than to come out this way, especially in a storm. Caleb didn't care. Maybe that was the problem. Titan shifted slightly, his ears twitching at something Caleb couldn't hear, and his posture changed. Subtle, but alert now. Focused. Caleb noticed. "You hear something, huh?" he said, voice low. Titan didn't respond, but his gaze had moved past Caleb now, fixed somewhere ahead in the darkness. Caleb followed it. At first, he saw nothing but rain and shadows. Then, a break in the trees, a narrow path, barely visible, cutting off from the main road. He almost missed it. The tires rolled past the turn before Caleb even registered it, but something in his chest tightened. Not fear, exactly. Something sharper. Instinct. Titan let out a low, quiet sound. Not a bark, more like a nudge. Caleb glanced at him. The dog's eyes were locked on that path behind them. "You want me to turn around?" Caleb asked, almost sarcastic. Titan didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. The rain pounded harder against the roof, filling the cab with noise. Caleb hesitated, fingers tightening on the wheel. Then, with a rough exhale, he hit the brakes. The truck skidded slightly before coming to a stop. For a second, he just sat there, engine idling, storm raging, heart thudding in his chest. "This is stupid," he muttered, but he was already shifting into reverse. The truck backed up slowly, tires crunching over gravel and mud, until the narrow path came into view again. It looked even worse up close. Overgrown, uneven, barely wide enough for the truck. Definitely not a road people used. "Yeah," Caleb said under his breath. "Perfect place to disappear." He turned the wheel. The truck dipped off the main road and onto the path, branches scraping against the sides with a sharp, grating sound. But the headlights cut through the darkness just enough to show a few feet ahead. Twisted roots, puddles, thick undergrowth. The deeper he went, the more the world behind him seemed to vanish. No lights, no signs, no way back, not easily. Just swamp, just silence between the bursts of thunder, and the steady presence of the dog beside him. Caleb leaned back slightly in his seat, one hand resting loosely on the wheel now. His breathing had slowed, just a little. The storm outside felt distant somehow. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. "Guess it's just us now," he said quietly. Titan finally moved, shifting closer, pressing his side lightly against Caleb's leg. Caleb didn't look at him, but he didn't pull away either. They drove deeper into the darkness together, leaving everything else behind, when neither of them knew it yet. But they weren't the only ones out there, and the past Caleb was trying to outrun was already waiting for him ahead. The path narrowed until it barely deserved to be called a road. Branches clawed at the truck, scraping along the doors like something alive, something trying to get in. The tires sank deeper into the mud with every yard, the engine straining as Caleb pushed forward. Rain hammered the roof so hard it drowned out everything else, everything except the sound in his head. A sharp crack, then another. Gunfire. Caleb's grip tightened instantly, knuckles whitening as his breath shortened. His vision tunneled, the world shrinking down to flashes, light, noise, motion. The windshield blurred, not just from rain, but from something inside him slipping loose. He blinked hard. Too hard. Also, for a second, the swamp wasn't there anymore. It was desert. Heat rippled across the horizon. The smell of fuel and dust filled his lungs. A convoy stalled on a narrow road. Voices shouting through static. Someone yelling coordinates. "Ward, move!" Caleb slammed his foot on the brake. The truck lurched violently, skidding sideways before coming to a stop at an angle. Mud splashed up around the tires, swallowing them halfway. Silence hit like a wall. No gunfire. No shouting. Just rain. Caleb's chest heaved as he sucked in air, eyes wide, unfocused. His hands trembled on the wheel, muscles locked tight like they were still bracing for impact. "I'm here," he whispered hoarsely. "I'm here." A weight pressed against his arm, warm, solid, real, Titan. The dog leaned into him, steady and unshaken, his breathing slow and even. But Caleb felt it through his sleeve, felt something grounding, something that didn't belong to the chaos in his mind. Caleb shut his eyes for a second and let the feeling anchor him. "Yeah," he said under his breath. "Yeah, I know." The moment stretched. Then slowly, painfully, the tension began to drain from his body. When Caleb opened his eyes again, the swamp had returned. Dark water pooled on both sides of the path, reflecting the storm in broken, shifting patterns. The trees stood tall and skeletal, their roots half submerged, like they'd been growing out of the water itself. This place didn't feel like land. It felt like something in between, something that swallowed men whole. Caleb glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing but darkness behind him. No headlights, no road, no way back he could see. "Oh, guess we're committed now," he muttered. Titan shifted, his ears flicking forward again. Alert, listening. Caleb followed his gaze instinctively. At first, there was nothing, just the steady rhythm of rain and wind through the trees. Then, a sound. Faint. Almost lost beneath the storm. A soft splash. Caleb stiffened. His eyes scanned the edges of the headlights, trying to pick out movement in the shadows. The swamp stretched out on both sides, murky water and thick undergrowth hiding whatever might be out there. "Probably just an animal," he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Titan didn't relax. If anything, he leaned forward, body tense, a low rumble building deep in his chest. Not fear, warning. Caleb swallowed. "Easy," he murmured. "Oh, we're not looking for trouble." But trouble didn't need to be looked for out here. It found you. Another splash. Closer this time. Caleb's heart rate ticked up again. But this time it wasn't memory driving it. This was real. He reached down slowly and opened the glove compartment, pulling out a small flashlight and the old knife he kept there. Not much, but it was something. Titan's eyes never left the darkness. Then, just as suddenly as it started, silence. No more splashes. No movement. Nothing. The swamp went still. Too still. Caleb held his breath without realizing it, listening for anything that might break the quiet. But nothing came. After a long moment, he exhaled slowly. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's not creepy at all." Titan finally eased back slightly, though his ears stayed alert. But Caleb shifted the truck into drive again. The engine growled, tires spinning for a second before catching enough traction to move forward. The path dipped lower, water pooling across it now, forcing the truck to push through shallow flooding. The deeper they went, the worse it got. The air grew thicker, heavier. The smell of rot and wet earth clung to everything. Even the rain seemed different here. Denser, almost suffocating. Caleb's shoulders tightened again. But not from memory this time. From instinct. From the feeling that this place wasn't meant for people. And yet, Titan moved again. Not with fear, with purpose. He shifted forward in his seat, eyes locked ahead, body angled slightly toward the windshield. Focused. Like he'd found something. Caleb frowned. "What is it?" The dog didn't respond, of course. But he didn't need to. Caleb could see it now too. Faint. barely visible through the rain. A darker shape ahead, tucked between the trees. At first, it looked like just another shadow. Then the headlights hit it at the right angle, and the outline sharpened. A structure, small, crooked, half hidden beneath vines and hanging moss. Caleb slowed the truck, squinting through the rain. "A house?" he murmured. No, not a house. A cabin. Old, forgotten, and somehow still standing in the middle of a place that swallowed everything else. Titan let out a low sound. Not fear, not quite. Recognition. Caleb felt something shift in his chest. Not relief, not yet, but something close. "Guess we found shelter," he said quietly. But even as he said it, something about the place didn't sit right. The way it stood there, too still, too quiet. Like it wasn't just abandoned. Like it was waiting. The truck rolled to a slow stop a few yards away. The engine idled. The rain kept falling. And for a long moment, neither Caleb nor Titan moved. They just stared at the cabin. Because deep down, they both felt it. This wasn't the end of the road. It was the beginning of something neither of them could see yet. And whatever it was, Titan had already found it. The engine ticked softly as Caleb turned the key and shut the truck off. For a moment, the sudden quiet felt louder than the storm. Rain still fell hard, drumming against the roof, sliding down the windshield in heavy streaks. But without the engine, everything else seemed to fade. The world narrowed to the sound of water and the dark shape waiting just ahead. Caleb didn't move. Neither did Titan. They both stared at the cabin. It leaned slightly to one side, like it had been slowly sinking for years. The wood was dark with age and rot, boards warped and split. Thick vines crawled up the walls, wrapping around the windows and across the roof, like they were trying to pull the structure back into the swamp. There was no light, no sign of life, no reason it should still be standing. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Yeah, that's not normal." Titan shifted, not away from the cabin, toward it. The dog's body tensed, ears forward, eyes locked on the front door. A low, almost inaudible growl rumbled deep in his chest. Not aggressive, not quite. Alert, focused, like he knew something Caleb didn't. Caleb glanced at him, then back at the cabin. "You're serious about this, huh?" Titan didn't look at him, didn't blink, when Caleb rubbed a hand over his face again, then reached for the door handle. The metal was cold, slick with moisture. The second he opened the door, the swamp air rushed in, thick, damp, heavy with the smell of mud and decay. He stepped out slowly, boots sinking slightly into the soft ground. Rain soaked through his jacket almost instantly. Titan jumped down beside him, landing lightly despite the mud. He didn't hesitate, didn't pause. He moved straight toward the cabin. "Hey!" Caleb called, but the dog didn't stop. Caleb swore under his breath and followed. Each step felt heavier than the last, the ground uneven beneath his boots. Water pooled around the base of the cabin, reflecting the dim light from the truck behind them. The closer they got, the more details came into focus. The windows. They weren't broken. Or they should have been, after years out here exposed to storms, to time. But they weren't. They were intact. Dirty, yes, but unbroken. Caleb slowed. That wasn't right. "Place like this should have been gone years ago," he muttered. Titan reached the porch first, or what was left of it. The wood creaked under his weight, but it held. Barely. Caleb stepped up behind him, testing each board before putting his full weight down. The structure groaned softly, like it was warning him, or welcoming him. He didn't like either option. The front door stood crooked in its frame, slightly ajar. Caleb froze. He hadn't noticed that from the truck. The door wasn't just loose. It was open. Not wide. Just enough. Enough for something or someone to go in. Or out. Caleb's pulse picked up again. Slower this time. Heavier. Not panic. An instinct. He glanced down at Titan. The dog stood perfectly still now, eyes fixed on the gap in the door. His body was tense, muscles coiled, ready, waiting. "All right," Caleb whispered. "We check it out. Slow." Titan didn't move. Caleb reached out and pushed the door gently. It creaked open with a long, low sound that seemed to stretch into the silence around them. Inside, darkness. Not just the absence of light. Something deeper. Caleb hesitated at the threshold, then stepped in. The smell hit him first. Not rot. Not exactly. It was stale. Closed off. Like air that hadn't moved in a long time. His boots thudded softly against the wooden floor as he moved forward, rain dripping from his clothes. Titan followed close behind, his nails clicking lightly against the boards. Caleb reached into his pocket and pulled out the flashlight, flicking it on. The beam cut through the darkness and froze. The room wasn't what he expected. It wasn't destroyed. It wasn't collapsed or overtaken by the swamp. It was intact. A table stood in the center, worn but upright. A chair pushed in neatly. Shelves lined one wall, holding old jars and containers, all placed carefully, deliberately. No signs of animals, no signs of looting, no chaos. Just order. Caleb's brow furrowed. "That's not right," he said quietly. A place like this, abandoned for years, should have been torn apart. By weather, by time, by something. But it wasn't. It looked like someone had left and expected to come back. Titan moved past him slowly, nose low to the ground, sniffing, tracking, not random, purposeful. Caleb followed the beam of the flashlight across the room. Dust coated everything, but not evenly. Some areas were thicker than others. Some surfaces, less disturbed. His gaze shifted to the floor. Footprints. Faint. Almost gone. But there. Caleb crouched slightly, narrowing his eyes. Not fresh, but not as old as everything else either. His chest tightened. "We're not the first ones here," he murmured. Titan stopped. Completely. His head snapped toward the far corner of the room. Caleb turned the light. Nothing there. Just a wall. Wooden planks, dark with age. But Titan didn't move. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared. Then slowly, deliberately, he walked over and stood in front of that spot, and sat. Still as stone. Caleb felt a chill crawl up his spine. "What is it?" Titan lowered his head slightly, nose hovering just above the floor. Then he began to paw at it. Not wildly, not digging in panic. Slow, controlled, intentional. Scrape, scrape, scrape. The sound echoed softly through the cabin. Caleb stepped closer, the beam of the flashlight steady on the spot Titan was working. At first, he saw nothing, just wood. Old, worn. Then, a line. So faint it almost disappeared into the grain. A seam. Caleb's breath caught. "No way." Titan kept scraping, ignoring the rough wood biting into his paws. Caleb dropped to one knee, brushing aside the dust with his hand. The line became clearer now, a rectangular outline hidden within the floor. A panel, carefully concealed. Caleb looked at Titan. The dog didn't stop, didn't even look up. He already knew. Caleb swallowed hard, his heartbeat picking up again. Not from fear this time, but something else. Something sharper. "All right," he said quietly. "Let's see what you found." He reached down, fingers tracing along the edge of the panel until he found a small gap. Then he pulled. The wood shifted, slowly, reluctantly, and as the panel lifted, darkness opened beneath it. Deep, cold, and waiting. A narrow staircase disappeared into the black. Caleb stared down into it, the beam of his flashlight barely touching the first few steps before being swallowed whole. The air rising from below felt different, cooler, still, like whatever was down there had been sealed away. Titan stopped pawing, but he didn't move away. He stood at the edge, looking down into the darkness, his body tense, not with fear, with certainty. Caleb felt it too now. This wasn't just a place to hide from the storm. This wasn't just a cabin. It was something else. Something buried. Something hidden on purpose. And somehow, his dog had known exactly where to find it. Caleb tightened his grip on the flashlight, then looked down into the dark one more time, and realized they had just crossed a line. There was no turning back now. Caleb didn't move. For a long second, he just stood there, staring into the darkness below the cabin floor, the beam of his flashlight barely cutting through the first few steps before disappearing into black. It felt wrong, not dangerous in a loud, obvious way, but quiet. Too quiet, like the kind of silence that waits. He swallowed, his throat dry despite the damp air. The rain outside had faded into the background, when replaced by something heavier pressing down on him. "You ever get the feeling," Caleb said softly, "that you're about to make a bad decision, and you do it anyway?" Titan didn't look at him. The dog stood at the edge of the opening, body still, ears forward, eyes fixed on the darkness below. Focused, not afraid. That was the part that bothered Caleb the most. If Titan had been scared, if he had backed away, growled, refused to go near it, Caleb might have shut the panel and walked right back out into the storm. But this wasn't fear. This was certainty. And Titan had been right before, more times than Caleb could count. Caleb let out a slow breath and adjusted his grip on the flashlight. "All right," he muttered. "We do this smart." He reached down and grabbed an old piece of wood leaning against the wall, now testing it for strength. It held, barely. Good enough. He tapped the first step with it. Solid. The second. Still solid. Caleb nodded once to himself, then stepped forward. The wood creaked under his weight, but it didn't give. "Stay close," he said. Titan moved immediately, stepping onto the stairs beside him without hesitation. They descended together. Each step down felt like leaving the world above a little further behind. The air changed first. Cooler, drier, cleaner. By the time they reached the bottom, Caleb noticed something else. No smell of rot, no swamp, no decay. That didn't make sense. He swept the flashlight across the room and stopped. What the hell? It wasn't a basement. It wasn't some forgotten crawl space. It was a room, a real room, walls reinforced with metal and thick wood. Shelves lined neatly along one side. Crates stacked in an organized row. A folding table stood against the far wall, covered in papers that had been carefully weighed down. Everything was intact, preserved, like time had been sealed out. Caleb stepped off the last stair slowly, boots hitting solid ground. The floor wasn't dirt, it was concrete. Someone had built this, on purpose. "Who goes through all this?" he whispered. Titan moved past him again, nose low, scanning. Caleb watched him carefully. The dog wasn't wandering. He was checking, clearing the space like he had done 100 times before. Old habits, military habits. Caleb felt a tightness in his chest. For a moment, he wasn't in a swamp bunker. He was back on base. Watching Titan move ahead of him, alert, precise, reading a room better than any man ever could. "Clear?" Caleb asked quietly, almost without thinking. Titan paused, then gave a small shift of his body, relaxed, but not fully. Safe enough. Caleb nodded to himself. Yeah, figured. He moved deeper into the room, the beam of his flashlight revealing more details. Canned food, water containers, medical supplies, all neatly arranged, not scattered, not abandoned, maintained. Someone was living down here, Caleb said. Not long ago. The dust on the shelves was thin, too thin. He ran his fingers across one of the crates and held them up to the light. A faint coating, but not years' worth. Weeks, months maybe, not more. Caleb's jaw tightened. We're not alone, he murmured. Titan stopped. His head turned sharply toward the far wall. Caleb followed his gaze. At first he saw nothing. Then, a shape, a table, covered in something. Caleb moved closer. Each step felt heavier. Not from fear, from expectation. He reached out slowly and lifted the cloth. Papers, stacks of them, organized, bound, carefully labeled. Caleb picked one up. His eyes scanned the page, then slowed, then stopped. Land records, he said quietly. Names, dates, coordinates, all tied to properties across the region. Caleb flipped another page, and another. Each one told the same story. Ownership transferred, signatures, legal seals, but something about it felt off. Too many properties, too many transfers, too clean, too fast. Something's wrong here, he muttered. Titan let out a low sound. Not a growl, a warning. Caleb looked up. The dog wasn't looking at the table anymore. He was staring at the wall behind it. Caleb turned slowly. There, mounted on the wall, was a map. Large, detailed, covered in markings, red circles, lines, notes scribbled in the margins. Caleb stepped closer, raising the flashlight. The map showed the entire swamp region, and beyond. Properties highlighted, routes marked, patterns forming. This isn't random, Caleb whispered. It was a system, a plan, something organized, something deliberate. His pulse picked up again, but this time it wasn't panic. It was realization. Someone's been tracking this, he said. Tracking land, people. Titan moved again, not toward the map, not toward the supplies, but toward a small corner of the room Caleb hadn't noticed yet. A chair, simple, wooden, positioned beside a narrow desk. Caleb followed. On the desk, a notebook, worn, used, but intact. Caleb hesitated, and then reached out and opened it. The first page was filled with handwriting. Careful, precise, personal, not records, not data. A journal. Caleb read the first line and felt something shift inside him. My name is Margaret Hale. He froze. Titan sat beside him, watching. Caleb swallowed slowly and kept reading. I don't know how much time I have left. The air in the room seemed to tighten, the walls closing in just slightly. Caleb's grip on the notebook firmed. This isn't just a bunker, he said quietly. His voice had changed. No longer uncertain, no longer just curious. Something else now, something sharper. This is evidence. Titan didn't move, but he didn't need to. He had already known. Caleb looked down at the page again, then back at the room around him. The supplies, the map, the records, the hidden entrance, all of it. This place hadn't been built to survive the swamp. It had been built to hide something. Something big. Something dangerous. And somehow, out of all the places in the world, Titan had led him straight to it. Caleb let out a slow breath, then turned another page, and stepped deeper into a truth he hadn't come here to find. The handwriting stayed steady for a while. That was the first thing Caleb noticed. Margaret Hale wrote like someone who had control. Clean lines, careful spacing, words chosen with purpose. Even in a place like this, even hiding underground, she had held on to something structured, something disciplined. It reminded him of field reports, of soldiers who kept writing even when everything around them was falling apart. Caleb leaned against the desk, the flashlight resting on the surface beside the notebook, its beam angled across the pages. Titan stayed close, sitting beside his leg, eyes moving between Caleb and the room, listening, always listening. Caleb read. I started noticing the patterns 6 months ago. Land transfers that didn't make sense. Families selling properties they'd held for generations, at prices that didn't match the market. He turned the page slowly. At first I thought it was coincidence. Then I realized, coincidence doesn't repeat itself this cleanly. Caleb's brow furrowed. He glanced back at the map on the wall, the red circles, the lines connecting them. It wasn't random. None of it was. They're forcing people out, Caleb murmured. Titan's ears flicked. Caleb continued reading. People disappear from public records before the sale is finalized. Some leave willingly. Some don't. The word lingered. Didn't. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. He'd heard that kind of language before. Not direct, not obvious, but heavy. Loaded. The kind of word that meant something worse without saying it outright. He flipped another page. The handwriting had changed. Still neat, but tighter. More pressure in the pen. I went to the county office, asked questions. Too many questions. Caleb exhaled slowly. Yeah, he said under his breath. That'll do it. Another page. They started watching me. The air in the bunker seemed to shift again. Colder. Closer. Caleb glanced over his shoulder instinctively, even though he knew there was no one there. Just walls. Just silence. Just the faint, distant sound of rain filtering through layers of wood and earth. Still, the feeling didn't leave. Titan stood, without a sound. He moved a few steps away from Caleb, nose low, scanning again. Not panicked, but alert, like something had changed. Caleb watched him, then looked back at the notebook. They don't want this exposed. I've seen too much now. The next line was underlined. If anything happens to me, this place holds everything. Caleb swallowed. Everything. He looked around the room again, this time with different eyes. Not just supplies, not just survival gear. Evidence. All of it. The crates, the records, the map. This wasn't someone hiding. This was someone preparing. Building a case. Fighting something bigger than herself alone. Caleb let out a slow breath. Damn, he muttered. But he knew that feeling. Being outnumbered, outmatched. Still pushing forward anyway. Not because you thought you'd win, but because you couldn't live with yourself if you didn't try. He turned another page. The writing shifted again. Messier now. Faster. They came to my house tonight. Caleb stiffened. I saw the truck before they even knocked. I didn't answer. The next line was darker, like the pen had been pressed harder. I left, took what I could, came here. Caleb's eyes moved faster now, drawn in. This was supposed to be temporary, just until I figured out who's behind it. He paused, looked around. Temporary. That word didn't match what he was seeing. This place wasn't temporary. It was built, prepared, stocked. Margaret Hale hadn't planned to leave quickly. She had planned to stay. Which meant something had changed. Caleb turned the page. The handwriting wavered slightly. I don't think I'm the one hunting them anymore. His chest tightened. I think they're hunting me. Silence filled the bunker again, heavy, pressing in from every side. Caleb looked up slowly. The walls, the shelves, the narrow staircase leading back up. It suddenly felt smaller, more confined, like the place had closed in around him without moving. Titan let out a low, quiet sound, not loud, not aggressive, but enough. Caleb followed his gaze. The dog was staring at the far side of the room again. Not the map, not the desk. Something else. Caleb stood slowly, the notebook still in his hand. What is it? He asked quietly. Titan didn't respond. He moved instead, careful, measured, toward the back wall, and Caleb stepped after him, each movement slower than the last. The beam of the flashlight swept across the surface. Wood, metal reinforcement. Nothing unusual, then a sound. Soft, barely there. A faint click. Caleb froze. His breath caught. Did you hear that? He whispered. Titan stopped. His body stiffened. Then, another sound. Not from the wall. From above. Caleb's head snapped upward. The ceiling. The cabin floor. Something moved. Just slightly. A shift in weight. A creak. Caleb's heart started pounding again. But this time it wasn't memory. This was real. Someone's up there, he said under his breath. Titan moved instantly, positioning himself between Caleb and the staircase, his body low, ready, protecting. Always protecting. Caleb's grip tightened on the flashlight, and his other hand reaching instinctively for the knife at his belt. The bunker that had felt like a hidden refuge moments ago now felt like a trap. One way in, one way out. And someone, or something, was standing above it. The silence stretched. Then, a single step. Slow, deliberate. The wood above creaked again. Caleb didn't move, didn't breathe. Titan's low growl filled the room, barely louder than a whisper, but enough to send a clear message. Whoever was up there, they weren't alone anymore, and neither was Caleb. The past he thought he'd left behind had caught up to him, and this time, it had teeth. Caleb didn't move. The sound above them settled into a heavy stillness, as if whoever or whatever had stepped across the cabin floor had decided to stop and listen. Just like they were. Rain continued to fall outside, when dull and distant now, filtered through layers of wood and mud. Inside the bunker, the air felt tight, almost electric. Caleb's grip tightened on the knife. Titan stood in front of him, body low, muscles coiled, eyes fixed on the staircase. The growl in his chest deepened, not loud, but steady, controlled. A warning, another creak from above. Then, nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just silence again. Too clean, too sudden. Caleb slowly let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Stay, he whispered. Titan didn't look back, but his posture shifted slightly, acknowledging the command, but not relaxing. Caleb's eyes flicked to the staircase. Going up now would be a mistake. Whoever was up there had the advantage. Higher ground, the only exit. If they rushed it blind, well, they'd be walking straight into something they couldn't see. Caleb had learned that lesson the hard way, more than once. He swallowed and forced himself to think. Not like this, he murmured. He stepped back slowly, putting distance between himself and the stairs. Titan mirrored him without hesitation. Caleb glanced back at the desk. The notebook. Margaret Hale. If someone was above them now, then whatever she had been running from, it wasn't gone. It was still here. And that changed everything. Caleb moved back to the desk, every step careful, controlled, his ears straining for any sound above. Nothing. Still nothing. He picked up the notebook again. If he was going to walk into something dangerous, he needed to understand what it was. He needed to know what she had known, what she had died for. Caleb turned the page. The handwriting was worse now, less controlled. Edges of letters jagged, spacing uneven. Fear had crept in. They found the Hendersons, he read quietly. They didn't fight. They signed everything over. Said it was easier that way. Caleb's jaw tightened. Easier, he muttered. He knew that word too. He'd heard it in briefings, in reports, in the quiet voices of men who had stopped believing they could change anything. It never meant easier. It meant giving up. Another page. I spoke to Mrs. Calloway. She said they came at night. No uniforms, no badges, just men. Caleb's fingers curled slightly around the paper. No uniforms, no badges. That meant no rules, no oversight, just power. He kept reading. They don't threaten you directly. Not at first. They just make you understand what happens if you say no. The words seemed to press into the page. Caleb could almost hear her voice now. Steady, but strained. They don't need to be violent to win. A soft creak above them again. Caleb froze. Titan's head snapped toward the stairs. Both of them went still. Listening. Waiting. The sound faded. Nothing followed. Caleb slowly exhaled again, though his pulse stayed high. They're still up there, he whispered. Titan didn't move. Didn't need to, he knew. Caleb forced his focus back to the notebook. He had to stay grounded, stay in control. That was the only way through. Another page. I found a pattern. Every property they take connects to something else. Routes, water access, transport lines. Caleb's eyes flicked to the map again. The red lines, the connections. Yet it wasn't random land grabbing. It was strategic. Built piece by piece like assembling a network. They're building something, Caleb said quietly. Not just stealing. Building. The realization settled heavy in his chest. Another page. I went to the sheriff. Caleb paused, already knowing how that would go. They told me to stop asking questions. He let out a humorless breath. Yeah, he said. Figures. They said I was seeing things, that I needed to let it go. The writing pressed harder into the page again. I didn't. Of course she didn't. Caleb felt a flicker of something shift inside him. Recognition. Respect. That stubborn refusal to back down, even when you knew it would cost you. He turned the page. The handwriting broke slightly at the top, like her hand had shaken. I think someone inside is helping them. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Inside, he repeated. That meant this wasn't just some outside group. It reached deeper, into systems, into people who were supposed to protect others. The room felt colder, smaller, more dangerous. Another sound above, this time closer. A slow step, right above the opening. Caleb's breath stilled. Titan's growl deepened, barely contained now. Whoever was up there, they were standing over the entrance, blocking it. Caleb didn't move, didn't look away from the notebook, but every muscle in his body tightened. Ready. Another page. The last one. The writing was rushed now, uneven, desperate. If you're reading this, then I didn't make it out. Caleb felt his chest tighten. They know about this place. His eyes lifted slowly. The ceiling, the stairs, the darkness above. They're already watching. The words hung in the air, heavy, final. Caleb closed the notebook slowly. For a moment, he just stood there, breathing, listening, thinking. Then he looked at Titan. The dog met his gaze for the first time since the sounds started above. No fear, just focus, just loyalty, just readiness. Caleb nodded once. A decision, not spoken, but understood. We don't wait for them to come down, he said quietly. Titan's posture shifted instantly. Ready. Caleb tightened his grip on the knife and glanced toward the stairs again. Stay close, he murmured, because whatever was waiting above them, it wasn't just part of Margaret Hale's story anymore. It was part of theirs now. And this time, Caleb wasn't running. Not from this, not anymore. Caleb moved first. Slow, deliberate. Every step measured like he'd done it 100 times before, in places far worse than this. The difference now wasn't the danger. It was the silence. No radio, no team, no one watching his back except the dog beside him. Titan stayed tight at his side, shoulder brushing Caleb's leg as they approached the staircase. The narrow steps led up into darkness, the faint outline of the open panel barely visible above. Caleb stopped at the bottom, listened. Nothing. No footsteps. No shifting weight. No breathing. Whoever had been up there wasn't moving anymore. That made it worse. Caleb crouched slightly, lowering his center of gravity. His hand tightened around the knife, the other holding the flashlight low, angled away from the opening. On me, he whispered. Titan didn't need the command, and he was already there. Caleb took the first step. The wood creaked under his weight. He froze. Waited. No reaction. Second step. Still nothing. Third. The beam of the flashlight brushed the edge of the opening above, catching splinters in the wood where the panel had been pulled back. The air shifted. Warmer. Thicker. The scent of rain returned. They were close now. Caleb slowed even more. Every muscle in his body tight, controlled, ready. One more step. Then, a sudden crack. Loud, sharp, right above him. Caleb reacted instantly. He threw himself backward, and something slammed down through the opening. A chunk of wood, heavy, splintered. It hit the step where his head had been a fraction of a second earlier. The impact echoed through the confined space. Titan barked once, sharp, explosive, then lunged forward, placing himself between Caleb and the opening. Easy! Caleb snapped, grabbing the dog's collar. Titan didn't pull back. He stood firm, teeth bared now, a deep growl rumbling through his chest. Caleb's heart hammered, adrenaline flooding his system. That wasn't an accident, he said under his breath. No way. That piece had been pushed, dropped, Timed. Whoever was up there had tried to hit him. Caleb steadied his breathing, forced it down, controlled it. Panic got you killed. Focus kept you alive. He glanced at Titan. The dog's eyes were locked on the opening, every muscle tense, waiting, listening. Then, silence again. Too clean, too fast. Caleb's jaw tightened. "They're testing us," he murmured, or warning, or both. He exhaled slowly and pulled Titan back a step. "Not that way," he said. "Not blind. Oh, not into a trap." He looked around the bunker again. The walls, the supplies, the map, the desk. There had to be more. A place like this, built with this much care, wouldn't have just one exit, wouldn't rely on a single point of failure. Caleb turned slowly, scanning every inch of the room now with a different mindset. Not just seeing, searching, thinking like the person who built it. Margaret Hale hadn't been careless. She had been hunted. That meant she would have planned. Redundancy, escape routes, backup options. His eyes moved across the far wall again. The one Titan had been focused on earlier. The reinforced section. Caleb stepped toward it, slower this time. "Show me," he said quietly. Titan didn't hesitate. He moved ahead, nose low, tracing along the base of the wall, back and forth, back and forth. But then he stopped, right in the corner. He pawed at it once, then again. Not frantic, not digging, just enough to mark it. "This spot," Caleb murmured. He crouched down beside Titan, running his hand along the wall. Wood, cold, solid. Then, a difference. Subtle, almost nothing. But there. The grain changed slightly. The texture. Caleb pressed harder and felt it give. Not much, but enough. "A panel," he said. "Hidden, better concealed than the floor above, designed not to be found, unless you knew where to look." Caleb leaned in, examining the edges. No handle, no obvious latch, just a seamless section built into the wall. He glanced at Titan. The dog stared back, waiting. Caleb exhaled. "All right," he said quietly. He pressed both hands against the panel, pushed. Nothing. He shifted his weight, and tried again. Still nothing. Then, he changed the angle, pushed sideways. A faint click, barely audible, but real. Caleb froze, then slowly applied pressure again. The panel moved, just a fraction, then more. Sliding inward with a soft, controlled sound, revealing darkness behind it. Not a room, a passage. Narrow, reinforced, leading deeper. Caleb stared at it, his mind racing. "Second exit," he said. Or something more. He angled the flashlight into the opening. The beam stretched down a short corridor, ending at another door. Metal, closed, sealed. Titan stepped forward immediately, placing himself between Caleb and the passage, nose twitching. Alert, focused, but not afraid. Caleb felt that same shift in his chest again. Not fear, not this time. This was something else, something sharper, and something pulling him forward. "This is what you were looking for," he said quietly to Titan. The dog didn't respond, but he didn't move away either. Caleb glanced once toward the staircase behind them. Still dark, still silent. Whoever was up there hadn't come down. Not yet. That meant one thing. They were waiting, and if Caleb stayed where he was, he'd be the one trapped. He turned back to the hidden passage, to the door at the end, to whatever Margaret Hale had decided was important enough to hide twice. "Yeah," Caleb murmured. "Let's see what they didn't want anyone to find." He stepped forward. Titan moved with him. Together, they entered the narrow passage, leaving the open bunker behind, leaving the known behind, and walking straight towards something deeper, and something hidden even better than everything else. Something that had been worth killing for. The passage was tighter than Caleb expected. The walls pressed in close on both sides, reinforced with steel brackets and aged wood, built with intention, not comfort. The air here was colder, stiller, untouched by the storm above. Every step echoed softly, swallowed quickly by the narrow space. Titan moved ahead of him now, not rushing, not hesitating, leading. His nose stayed low, tracking something invisible, something Caleb couldn't sense, but trusted anyway. Caleb kept the flashlight steady, the beam cutting through the darkness toward the metal door at the end of the corridor. It was thicker than the rest of the structure, reinforced, sealed, not meant to be opened casually. "Yeah," Caleb whispered. "Oh, that's the one." He slowed as they approached. Every instinct told him to stop, to turn around, to get out. But something stronger pushed him forward. Not curiosity, not anymore. This felt like responsibility, like stepping into something someone else hadn't been able to finish. Titan stopped in front of the door. He didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stood there, staring at it, waiting. Caleb stepped up beside him. The door had no handle, no keypad, nothing obvious. Just a flat, cold surface, dull with age but intact. He ran his hand across it slowly, feeling, searching. Then, a small indentation, near the side, almost hidden. Caleb pressed it. A click echoed softly through the corridor. Then another. A low mechanical shift followed, something internal unlocking after years of silence. When Caleb's breath slowed. "Still works," he murmured. The door moved, not fast, not loud, just enough to break the seal. A thin line of darkness opened, then widened. The air that drifted out was colder than anything they'd felt so far. Dry, preserved, untouched. Caleb raised the flashlight and stepped inside, and stopped. The room beyond was different from the bunker, smaller, more focused. Every inch of it designed for one purpose. The walls were lined with metal shelving, each one filled with neatly labeled boxes, folders, and sealed containers. A single desk stood at the center, more organized than anything else they had seen so far. This wasn't survival. This was storage. Careful, intentional, important. Caleb stepped forward slowly. Titan followed, staying close, but his posture had changed again. More alert, more intense, as if whatever was in here mattered more than anything else. Caleb reached the desk. On it sat a small device. Old, but functional. A recorder. Next to it, a stack of labeled drives, and a folder. Different from the others. Marked. Not with a number, but with a name. Caleb picked it up. His eyes scanned the front, then narrowed. "Margaret Hale," he read. His pulse picked up. "This is it." He opened the folder carefully. Inside, photographs, documents, signed statements, everything organized with precision. Caleb flipped through them, his movements slower now, more deliberate. Each page revealing more connections, more proof, more weight. "These aren't just land records," he said quietly. "These are cases. People, families, names attached to faces, stories reduced to files. Each one connected to the map upstairs, each one tied to the same pattern: forced sales, disappearance from records, ownership transferred, over and over, systematic, controlled, planned. Caleb's jaw tightened. "This is a network," he said. "Not a group, not random, a system." He turned another page and froze. A photograph, clear, sharp, taken from a distance. A group of men standing outside a courthouse. One of them familiar. Caleb leaned closer. The face clicked into place. Not from the war. From town. The sheriff. Caleb felt something drop in his chest. "No," he whispered. He flipped to the next page. More photos, more names, more connections. Officials, business owners, people who were supposed to protect others, all tied together, all part of it. Margaret wasn't just investigating land," Caleb said quietly. "She was uncovering them. The entire system." Titan let out a low sound. Not a warning. Something else. Caleb looked down. The dog wasn't focused on the files. He was staring at the recorder, the one on the desk. Caleb followed his gaze. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then slowly, he reached out, pressed play. The device crackled softly. Static filled the small room. Then, a voice, faint, tired, but clear. "If you're hearing this," Caleb's breath caught. Margaret Hale. "I didn't have time to finish everything." The recording paused briefly, as if she had taken a breath. "They know who I am now." Caleb's grip tightened on the edge of the desk. "I tried to go to the authorities." A soft, bitter sound. "They're part of it." The words settled heavily in the room. Titan didn't move. Neither did Caleb. "They don't just take land," Margaret continued. "They control access, water, transport, routes people don't even realize they depend on." Caleb's mind raced. The map, the lines, the pattern. It's bigger than property. The recording crackled slightly. "They're building something under the cover of legality." Caleb leaned in closer. "What kind of something?" he murmured. Margaret's voice lowered, more urgent now. "I don't know how far it goes." A pause, then, "If I disappear, it means they've decided I know too much." Caleb's chest tightened. "And if you found this?" The static grew louder for a second, then cleared. "They're still active." Silence. The recording ended with a soft click. The room felt smaller and heavier. Caleb stood there, unmoving, processing. Everything. The bunker, the files, the system, the people involved, and the truth Margaret Hale had died trying to protect. "This wasn't buried," he said quietly. "It was hidden, waiting for someone to find it, to finish it." Titan stepped closer, pressing lightly against Caleb's leg, grounding him again, reminding him he wasn't alone. Caleb looked down at the dog, then back at the files, then at the door behind them, the one they had just opened, the one someone clearly didn't want opened. "They tried to stop her," Caleb said. His voice had changed again, stronger now, focused. "But they didn't erase it." Titan held his gaze, and for the first time since they entered the swamp, Caleb didn't feel like he was running. He felt like he had found something real, something that mattered, something worth staying for. But above them, the world hadn't gone quiet. It had only been waiting, and now, they were holding the one thing that could tear it open. Caleb didn't speak. He just stood there, the weight of everything settling into his chest like something solid, something heavy that wasn't going anywhere. The files in his hands, the voice still echoing in his head. The realization that this wasn't over. It had never been over. Titan shifted beside him. Not restless, not afraid. Alert. Listening. Caleb followed the dog's attention instinctively. The silence had changed. It wasn't empty anymore. It felt occupied. A faint vibration passed through the floor beneath Caleb's boots. So slight it could have been missed, but it wasn't. Caleb's head lifted slowly. "Oh, did you feel that?" he whispered. Titan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His ears were forward, body tense again, eyes locked on the corridor behind them. Caleb turned. The narrow passage they had come through now felt different, darker, closer, like it had shrunk while they weren't looking. Then, a sound, faint, from beyond the hidden wall. Not the storm, not the cabin settling. Something else. Movement. Caleb's jaw tightened. "They didn't leave," he said quietly. "They stayed. Watching. Waiting." He stepped quickly to the desk and began gathering the files, only the most important ones. The folder with Margaret's name. The drives. The recorder. Not everything. Just enough. He moved fast now, efficient. No hesitation. Titan stayed close, shifting position to keep himself between Caleb and the corridor. On guarding, always guarding. Another sound, closer this time. A dull thud. Then, a scrape. Wood against wood. Caleb's pulse spiked. "They're opening the panel," he said. Not guessing. Knowing. The hidden entrance they had used to get here, it wasn't hidden anymore. Caleb zipped the folder into his jacket, slipping the drives into his pocket. The recorder followed. He glanced once at the rest of the room. Everything Margaret had built. Everything she had protected. Left behind. "Sorry," he murmured under his breath. Then he turned. "Let's move." Titan didn't wait. He pivoted instantly, leading the way back into the narrow passage. Caleb followed close behind, flashlight cutting through the darkness, each step faster than the last. Behind them, a sharp crack echoed through the bunker, the sound of wood breaking. They were in. Caleb's breathing steadied, but his pace didn't slow. He wasn't running blind. He was moving with purpose, the way he had been trained, the way he had survived. "Stay ahead," he whispered. Titan surged forward slightly, guiding the path. The metal door at the end of the passage slid into view. Open. They pushed through, back into the bunker, and everything had changed. The silence was gone, replaced by movement. Faint shadows shifting near the staircase. Caleb stopped instantly, pulling Titan back. He lowered the flashlight. Waited. Listened. Footsteps. Above. On the cabin floor. More than one. Slow. Deliberate. Not searching anymore. Closing in. Caleb's mind raced. "They know we're down here," he whispered. Of course they did. The panel had been opened. The noise. The time. But everything pointed to one thing. They were being tracked. Caleb's eyes scanned the bunker quickly. One exit blocked. One exit used. No more time. He turned toward the hidden wall again. "That way," he said. Titan moved immediately. They slipped back into the narrow passage, the sound of footsteps above growing heavier, more defined. Someone moved directly over the staircase. Another crossed the cabin floor. A third paused, right above where they had entered. Caleb felt it. The pressure. The presence. "They're not rushing," he murmured. "They're confident." That was worse. Much worse. It meant they thought they already had control. Caleb pushed forward. The passage seemed longer now, tighter, the walls pressing in as if trying to slow them down. Titan reached the end first, the metal door still open. Cool. And beyond it. Darkness. Unknown. But better than being trapped. Caleb didn't hesitate. Go. Titan slipped through. Caleb followed. And the moment he crossed the threshold, he heard it. A voice. Above. Muffled, but clear enough. Check below. Caleb froze for half a second. That was all it took. Titan barked sharply once. Not fear. Command. Move. Caleb snapped back into motion. They couldn't stay. Not here. Not anymore. He moved deeper into the hidden room again, scanning quickly for another exit, another path, anything that Margaret might have built. Something she would have needed. Because she had known. She had known they would come. His eyes moved across the walls, the shelves, the floor. Think. Think like her. Where would you go? Where would you hide? When hiding wasn't enough anymore, wasn't. Went behind him. A heavy thud. The sound of something being forced open. Closer now. Caleb's chest tightened. They're coming down, he said. No more time. No more hesitation. Titan moved suddenly, sharp, direct, toward the far corner of the room. Not where the desk was. Not where the files had been. A different spot. Caleb followed instantly. The dog stopped at the base of the wall, pressed close, nose low. Then, he scratched once, twice, and looked back. Caleb's eyes narrowed. Another one. Another hidden point. Of course. Margaret Hale hadn't built one layer of protection. She had built many. Caleb dropped to his knees, hands moving fast now, searching, feeling, and then a seam. Faint, but there. His pulse surged. Good boy, he whispered. And behind them, the unmistakable sound of boots hitting the bunker floor. They were inside. Caleb didn't look back. Didn't need to. He pushed against the wall and felt it give, just slightly. Not much, but enough. The second door, and whatever waited beyond it, was now the only thing standing between them and the people who had never stopped watching. Caleb pushed harder. The hidden panel groaned under pressure, resisting at first, then giving way just enough to create a narrow opening. Cold air rushed through the gap, sharper than anything behind them. Move, Caleb whispered. Titan didn't hesitate. He slipped through the opening, body low, silent. Caleb followed immediately, dragging the panel back just enough to slow whoever was behind them. It wouldn't hold long. Nothing would. But seconds mattered now. But the space beyond was tighter than anything before. A crawl space. Barely wide enough for a man to move through without turning sideways. The walls were reinforced with older timber, rough and uneven, brushing against Caleb's shoulders as he moved. The ground sloped slightly downward, then leveled out. Pitch black. The beam of his flashlight barely filled the narrow space. Behind him, a heavy crash. The panel they had just forced open. Voices, clear now. They're here. Search it. Caleb's chest tightened. No panic. Not anymore. Something else had taken its place. Focus. Cold. Precise. The kind that came when there was nothing left to lose. He moved faster. Keep going, he whispered. Titan stayed ahead, navigating without hesitation, like he already knew the path. Caleb trusted him. Well, out here, that was the only thing that mattered. The crawl space turned sharply, forcing Caleb to duck lower. His shoulder scraped against the wood, but he didn't slow. Behind them, the voices grew louder, closer. They went this way. A beam of light flickered through the cracks behind them. They were right on their trail. Caleb's breathing stayed steady, controlled. In, out, in, out. Not fear, not anymore. He had felt fear in the beginning, back in the truck, back when he thought he was just running from himself. But now it was different. This wasn't about him anymore. This was about something bigger. Something Margaret Hale had died trying to expose. Something those men were still protecting. And for the first time in a long time, Caleb wasn't running from anything. He was moving towards something. The tunnel opened suddenly. Wider, higher. Caleb stepped out of the crawl space into another chamber, smaller than the main bunker, less organized, more personal. A secondary hide. Emergency use. Titan moved to the center of the room, turning in a slow circle, scanning. Caleb followed, sweeping the flashlight across the walls. A cot, a small crate of supplies, a single lantern, and a door. Wooden, old, reinforced from the inside. Caleb exhaled. "Exit," he said. But he didn't move toward it immediately. Instead, he stood still. For the first time since the chase began, he stopped. Behind him, the sounds of pursuit continued, muted now, distant, but still there, still coming. Caleb lowered the flashlight slightly. His shoulders rose and fell once, twice, then stilled. Titan watched him, waiting, but not pushing, just there. Caleb looked down at his hands, still steady. That surprised him. Months ago, he wouldn't have been. He would have been shaking, breathing too fast, seeing things that weren't there. Back in that bar, he had lost control, completely. The noise, the movement, the sudden rush of bodies. It had pulled him back, made everything blur together. War. Home. No difference. But now he could hear it. The footsteps behind them, the voices, the threat. And it didn't break him. It sharpened him. Caleb let out a slow breath. "I remember this feeling," he said quietly. Not to Titan. Not really. To himself. The calm, the clarity, the edge of something dangerous. But controlled. He hadn't felt it since he came home. Until now. Titan stepped closer, pressing lightly against his side, but grounding him, confirming it. "You're here. You're in control." Caleb nodded once. "Yeah," he murmured. Then his eyes lifted, back to the door, back to the moment. Decision. He reached into his jacket and touched the folder. The drives, the recorder, all still there. Everything Margaret Hale had left behind. Everything those men wanted buried. Caleb's jaw tightened. "They don't get this back," he said. Not a question, not a hope, a statement. Titan's ears flicked. Agreement. Caleb stepped toward the door. His hand rested on the wood. Paused. Then he pushed. The door opened outward with a slow, heavy creak. Fresh air rushed in. Cold, clean, alive. Not the stale, trapped air of the bunker. Not the suffocating weight of the swamp interior. This was different. Open. Free. Caleb stepped through, and stopped. The world outside had changed. The storm had passed. The rain had slowed to a light drizzle. The sky above was breaking, faint light pushing through the clouds. The swamp stretched out in front of them. But they weren't where they had entered. This was deeper, farther, hidden. No path, no tracks, no easy way back. Caleb stepped out fully, turning to take in his surroundings. Then, a sharp crack echoed behind him, from inside. Voices again, Closer. They had found the passage. Caleb didn't hesitate. "Move," he said. Titan surged forward. They pushed into the swamp, moving fast now, weaving between trees, stepping over roots, water splashing underfoot. Behind them, the men emerged, shadows between shadows, voices cutting through the air. "There!" Caleb didn't look back. Didn't need to. Could feel them, feel the chase closing in. But something had changed. He wasn't running blindly anymore. He had direction, purpose, a reason. The files pressed against his chest, the dog at his side, the truth behind him, and the choice in front of him. For the first time in a long time, Caleb Ward knew exactly what he was going to do, and he wasn't going to stop. The swamp no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a path. Every step forward, every breath he took, carried weight now, purpose pressing against his ribs like something alive. The folder inside his jacket wasn't just evidence anymore. It was a line. And once crossed, there was no going back. "Stay close," he murmured. Titan didn't need the command. The dog moved beside him, not ahead this time, not pulling, matching his pace, watching his blind spots. But the wound on Titan's shoulder had soaked through part of his fur, dark and damp, but he didn't slow, didn't falter. Caleb noticed. He always did. "Almost there," he said, though he wasn't sure how far there really was. But he had a direction now, not deeper into the swamp, out, toward the edge, toward people, toward exposure. Branches snapped behind them, voices again, closer than before. "They're heading east!" Caleb's jaw tightened. They weren't guessing anymore. They were tracking. "Move faster." The ground shifted underfoot, mud sucking at his boots, water rising past his ankles. The swamp tried to hold him again, like it had before, but this time he knew how to fight it. Short steps. Keep momentum. Don't panic. Titan adjusted instantly, cutting slightly ahead to test the ground, while choosing the safest path with quick, instinctive movements. The rain softened. The sky above cracked open just enough to let a thin strip of pale light through. Dawn was coming. Caleb pushed harder. Then, a sharp sound. Too close. Not behind them. To the side. Titan reacted first. A low, warning growl. Caleb turned. A man stepped out from behind a cluster of cypress trees. Not shouting. Not rushing. Calm. Like he'd been waiting. Caleb froze. The man raised a hand slightly. Not in greeting. In control. "You've got something that doesn't belong to you," he said. His voice was steady, flat, not angry. That made it worse. Caleb didn't answer. Titan shifted in front of him, body low, protective. The man's eyes flicked to the dog, then back to Caleb. "You don't understand what you're carrying," he continued. "Walk away now, and you still can." Caleb felt it. That pull, that instinct, the same one that had told him to run days ago, to disappear, to survive. But something inside him had changed. He shook his head once. Slow. "I understand enough." The man sighed. A small, almost disappointed sound. Then, movement, fast, from the trees behind. 2 more figures stepped out. Then another. They had closed the circle. Titan's growl deepened. Caleb's grip tightened on the folder under his jacket. "Last chance, phone," the first man said. Caleb didn't hesitate. "No." The word hung in the air. Final. For a split second, everything stilled. Then chaos broke loose. Titan launched first, a blur of muscle and instinct driving straight toward the nearest threat. The man stumbled back, caught off guard, arms coming up too late, and Caleb moved the opposite direction. Not toward them. Through them. He didn't fight, didn't stop. He ran, Branches whipped against his face as he broke through the trees, boots pounding against uneven ground, breath sharp but controlled. Behind him, shouts, movement, the sound of pursuit exploding again. But there was something else now, something new. Distance. He had created space. Not enough, but something. "Titan!" he called. A heartbeat passed. Then, the sound of paws hitting the ground behind him. Fast, closing. Titan burst through the trees, falling back into position at his side like he had never left. Caleb didn't look back. Didn't need to. They ran. The swamp began to thin. Water gave way to firmer ground. Trees spaced out. The air changed, less heavy, less trapped. Caleb saw it then. Ahead, through the thinning line of trees, a road. Narrow, gravel, but real. Civilization. Help. Exposure. He pushed harder. Behind him, the voices grew louder again. "They're heading out! Cut them off!" Too late. Caleb broke through the last line of trees and stumbled onto the edge of the road, boots hitting solid ground for the first time in what felt like forever. He turned, Titan beside him, both of them breathing hard, waiting. The trees behind them rustled, shadows moving just beyond the line. But none of them stepped out. Not yet. They were watching, calculating. Caleb understood. Out here, it was different. Witnesses, visibility, risk. The advantage had shifted. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone. Cracked, water damaged, barely functional, but it turned on. 1 bar of signal. That was enough. Caleb scrolled, found the number. Lena Brooks. He hesitated for only a second, then pressed call. It rang. Once, twice, 3 times, then a voice, tired, cautious. "Hello?" Caleb looked back at the tree line. Shadows still there. Still watching. Still waiting. "This is Caleb Ward," he said. "I have something you need to see." A pause. Then, "What kind of something?" Caleb glanced down at the folder pressed against his chest, at Titan beside him, at the swamp behind them. "The kind that gets people killed," he said. Silence. Then her voice again. Different now. Sharp. "Where are you?" Caleb gave her the road marker. The closest town. Everything he could. "I'm coming," she said. The line went dead. Caleb lowered the phone slowly. Titan sat beside him, eyes still locked on the trees, on waiting. The wind shifted. The shadows moved. But still, they didn't come out. Caleb understood why. Not here. Not anymore. He let out a long breath. Not relief, not yet. But something close. Because for the first time, the truth wasn't buried anymore. It was out. And once it reached the surface, there was no pushing it back down. The road stayed quiet. Too quiet. Caleb stood there longer than he needed to, eyes locked on the tree line, waiting for movement that never came. The men were still in there. He could feel it. But they didn't step out. Not onto open ground. Not where they could be seen. Titan remained beside him, steady, alert, the low tension in his posture never fading. Even injured, he stood like a wall, protecting. Always protecting. Minutes passed. Then, the distant hum of an engine. Caleb turned. A single pickup truck appeared down the road, kicking up a thin trail of dust as it approached. It slowed when it saw him, saw the mud, the blood, the dog. The truck stopped. The driver's door opened. A woman stepped out. Mid-30s, sharp eyes, no hesitation. Caleb Ward? She called. Caleb nodded once. Lena Brooks. She closed the distance quickly, her gaze flicking over him, then landing on Titan, then back to Caleb's face. You look like hell, she said. Feels about right. She didn't smile. Her eyes shifted past him, to the swamp. Are they still in there? Caleb didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. That was enough. Lena took a breath, then nodded once. Get in the truck. Caleb didn't move. Not yet. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out the folder, the drives, the recorder, everything, and he held it out. Lena didn't take it right away. She studied his face. You sure? She asked. Caleb glanced down at Titan, at the blood matted into his fur, at the quiet strength in the dog's eyes, then back at Lena. I didn't come this far to keep it, he said. She took it, carefully, like it weighed more than it should. Then let's make sure it doesn't disappear again. They got into the truck. Lena drove, fast. The swamp faded behind them, swallowed by distance and sunlight as the sky continued to clear. The road stretched ahead, winding through stretches of forgotten land and scattered homes. Caleb sat in silence. Titan lay across the seat beside him, breathing slow, steady, but heavier than before. Caleb rested a hand on his side. You did good, he murmured. Titan's tail thumped once, weak but certain. They reached town within the hour. Small, quiet. The kind of place where nothing ever really changed. Until now. Lena didn't stop at her office. She drove straight past it. To the station? Caleb asked. She shook her head. Not yet. She glanced at the folder on the seat between them. Not until this is backed up in 10 different places. Caleb understood. Trust wasn't something you gave easily. Not here. Not after everything. They pulled into a small building behind a row of shops. Lena grabbed the folder and motioned for him to follow. Inside, the room was cluttered with equipment. Computers, cameras, stacks of paper. She moved fast, plugging in drives, opening files, scanning. Her expression changed as she read. From focus, to disbelief, to something sharper. Jesus, she whispered, and Caleb leaned against the wall, watching, waiting. Titan lay at his feet now, finally allowing himself to rest. Lena turned to him. This is bigger than I thought, she said. Way bigger. Caleb nodded once. I know. She hesitated. Then, once this goes out, there's no stopping it. I'm counting on that. Lena studied him again, then nodded. Okay. She turned back to the screen, started typing, making calls, sending files, setting something in motion that couldn't be undone. Hours passed. By the time the first story hit, the sun had fully broken through the clouds. Phones started ringing. Not just hers. Everywhere. Voices spread. Names surfaced. Questions were asked that no one could ignore anymore. By evening, the town wasn't quiet anymore. People gathered. Whispers turned into conversations. Conversations turned into anger. And the swamp, the place that had hidden everything, was suddenly the center of it all. Caleb stood outside the building as it unfolded, watching, listening. Not part of the noise, but no longer outside it either. Titan stood beside him again, always there. Lena stepped out after a while, her phone still buzzing in her hand. It's everywhere, she said. State level, maybe more by morning. Caleb let out a slow breath. Good. She looked at him. What are you going to do now? Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked back toward the direction of the swamp. Miles away now, but still there. still real, still part of this. Then he looked down at Titan, at the scars, at the quiet strength that had carried them both through everything. "I'm not leaving," he said, and Lena raised an eyebrow. "Staying here?" Caleb nodded. "There's more out there," he said. "More than just files." She understood. Places, people, truths that hadn't been uncovered yet. "Then you're going to need help," she said. Caleb gave a small nod. "I've got him." Titan's ears twitched. Lena smiled faintly. "Fair enough." Days passed, then weeks. The investigation grew. Names fell. Land was returned. Families who had been pushed out, forgotten, started to come back. And the cabin, that rotting, hidden place in the swamp, didn't disappear. It changed. People found it, visited it. Not for what it looked like, but for what it held. A story, a warning, a truth that refused to stay buried. And Margaret Hale's name was spoken again. Not in fear, but in respect. Caleb returned there one evening, alone, except for Titan. The swamp was quieter now, different, not as heavy. The cabin stood where it always had, broken, but no longer forgotten. Caleb sat on the steps. Titan lay beside him. The air was still, calm. For the first time, it didn't feel like something was watching. Caleb leaned back slightly, eyes scanning the water, the trees, the fading light. "You ever think we'd end up here?" he asked quietly. Titan didn't answer. Didn't need to. He was there. That was enough. Caleb reached down, resting a hand on his side. The scars were still there. On both of them. They always would be. But they weren't running anymore. Not from the past. Not from anything. The wind moved softly through the trees. The swamp breathed. And for the first time in years, Caleb Ward felt something he hadn't known how to hold on to before. Peace. Not loud. Not overwhelming. Just there. He closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Titan shifted closer. Not leaving. Never leaving. And this time, Caleb didn't feel alone. If this story meant something to you, I want to hear from you. Just drop a simple comment below. Type 1 if you believe loyalty like Titan's still exists. Or type 0 if this story hit you in a deeper, more personal way. And if you've ever felt lost, but kept going anyway. Tell me where you're watching from. I read every comment. Don't forget to subscribe and stay with us, because the next story might be even closer to your heart. There are more stories out there, and we're just getting started.